Hey friends, thank you for being here for another week in the books. As you can see, I am where I wanted to be this week, in my library, surrounded by my books. It's good to be with friends. And that's not to say that everything is perfectly put away, because there are some things that I'm looking at off camera that definitely need to get situated, but I am very, very happy to be in my book space. There's something about organizing your books that is just a real joy. So I've got my books around me, I've got some tea steeping that I can't wait to drink, and I've got 3 books to talk to you about. You guys, I started talking about this book and realized that I hadn't even hit record, so that's what's going on. Anyway, the first book that I want to talk to you about is Vanity Fair, because if you remember from last week, I said that that was the next classic I was moving on to, and so here we are. I have the physical copy with me, but I ended up audiobooking it because the unpacking needed some entertainment, and this was pretty fine entertainment for the most part. I think it was interesting to read this so quickly after Middlemarch because it feels like they're kind of out to do the same thing. Vanity Fair came first, Middlemarch I think was like 20 or 30 years later, but they're dealing with like British society and sort of like mundane dramas of what's gonna happen when so-and-so marries this woman against his father's wishes, but also there's a war going on. This is the times when Napoleon was out and about doing his thing. And so you get some real life stakes with officers going to war, and then also there are some female characters who you're like, okay, but what's gonna happen to her? Like, how's she gonna live if her finances have been taken away due to her husband disobeying his father? And then throughout the whole book, there's a particular focus on a character named Becky Sharp, which when I heard that name, I was like, Becky? In a historical novel like this? Of course her real name's Rebecca, but it just kind of made me laugh because Becky didn't seem like, I guess I didn't realize that people were called Becky back then, and not just the formal Rebecca, but the more you know. Anyway, she's a character who, she's interesting, and I'm trying to think if she redeemed herself by the end, because she was one of those characters who throughout the whole story, you're just like, is she really gonna continue getting away with this and this and this? And does no one see through her? And like, how can you put up with her? And then of course, as like her counterpart, there's a very, very sweet woman who you're just like, man, does her lot get any better? How come Becky gets to get away with this stuff? And Amelia is dealing with this. So I think that's good, like, tensions for a reader, even though don't really like to see Becky win when she does, or in the times where she kind of gets away with a scheme where you're just like, nah, what about Amelia? So I like this, as you can tell, better than Middlemarch. I thought that the tone of the voice and how it was written stylistically was just way more active. Middlemarch was so passive, so what this got right was that it was so much more engaging for the readers. And like, yeah, I don't know these people. Their drama isn't my drama. Or even my neighbor's drama, who I know. But it was interesting, it was engaging, and the pacing of it was done really well. So even though that this one is kind of a thick guy, not as thick as Middlemarch, but like it's a couple hundred pages, 600 some odd, I think. It went by pretty quick actually, and I think that's just by the nature of how the author dealt with pacing and tone of voice. So I enjoyed it. I still have to review it for my classics project, but it was an overall good experience. Tea break, because it is ready. I have teas that are themed after national parks that I received as a gift a while back, and this morning I cracked open Zion National Park tea. That's good stuff. to the books now. All right, next up is Skin of the Sea, which is a book I really, really enjoyed. I even debated with myself, is it 5-star? Is it only a 4-star? Don't get me wrong, 4-star, which is what I went with, is still a really, really good book. But I thought that there were so many well done things that I considered the ultimate 5-star rating. I am kind of a harsh critic, so even a 4-star book, though people should know, is really, really good to me. There were some things about some characters that felt a little too tropish, or their arcs, I could see where they were going long before they ended. But I thought it was fun, and I thought it was well done, and I really loved the Odyssey vibes that it had. I really enjoy the Odyssey when I read it, and I know that the adventure story calls to a lot of us, and this is a classic adventure story of the main character who needs to go in search of a resolution or fix something that they've done. And the main character that we have here, Simi, is very compelling, very well layered, and I thought she was a joy to travel along with, even if her story deals with just some traumatic things and heavier things that you're like, man, I wish this was different for you. But she was solid. Now this is a historical fantasy, and I think that genre is so much fun because you're rooted in a very specific time. In this case, it's the start of the transatlantic slave trade, and dealing with the reality of people being taken from their homes in Africa and put on these ships and setting out across the water. Except Simi, who that was her experience, Simi didn't make it. You don't know why she doesn't make the journey, but you know that she somehow ended up in the sea and was rescued by the sea goddess, who then turns her into a mermaid who gives her the task of essentially doing the same thing in the way that Simi finds other people, other souls who have fallen overboard, thrown overboard, whatever the case may be, and she must ferry their souls to make sure that they make it to the afterlife okay. Which I think is a very interesting dynamic just in and of itself, Simi being who she is and then this being her purpose. But then at the very start of the story, she does something that upsets kind of the equilibrium of her purpose, and there are 6 others like her, those mermaids who answer to the sea goddess, and what she does puts them at risk, and so she must set out on this journey to seek forgiveness and ensure that her fellow mermaids will be okay, that the magic in the world will kind of stay at the equilibrium that it needs to be. And of course, along the way, she encounters different characters. There are some other creatures and beings from African mythology who appear, and the world building is just very full, very fun, very immersive, and I think that this is just a very, very solid adventure story. If you are like me and you maybe a little tired of romantasy, because you're just like, I want a story, I want a plot, I don't really want smut today, this one could be for you because it doesn't, there's a romance thread, so it strays a little into that realm, but you won't be clutching your pearls, I'll tell you that. And that's, I think, is very refreshing because it really is just a true adventure, and it was a lot of fun. All right, last up I have Custodians of Wonder, which I had a lot of fun with this book. I love books like this because I always learn something fun, something new that I just don't know where else I'd learn about this stuff unless I did an incredibly deep dive on the internet of like, hey, what are some obscure things that people do in the world? And by obscure, I mean these people in this book are kind of the last of their kind. So the author is taking a look and doing a deep dive into different traditions, different ways of being that are maybe going extinct, because there's only like 2 or 3 people, maybe even a single person left in the world who does this sort of thing, Like he looks at a specific woman who makes the most difficult type of pasta in the world, and I think it's she and one other person are the only people who like know the recipe down to perfection because it's just that difficult. Or a man in Japan who is taking care of like the secret sauce ingredients for the soy sauce recipe, the original soy sauce recipe. My personal favorite was when he was talking about the readers that are a thing in cigar factories in Cuba. Not very many readers left. I don't know if you're familiar at all with the tradition of having a reader in cigar factories. I thought it was very interesting, the history of it, how they played such a huge impact in just Cuban Revolution. It's very interesting to me. But it's stuff like that you're like, I didn't know people did that. I didn't know that was a thing. Or in this day and age when you're like, let's take for instance the readers in the cigar factory, where you're like, audiobooks exist, podcasts exist, the radio, television. What's the purpose of having a reader then if they are so replaceable? And it explores things like that, talking about things that we have now in the modern day that maybe make some of these traditions, some of these roles obsolete, yet there are still people who persist with them. And I think that is very interesting as far as what it means to be human and the human experience, like from a sociology point of view. I just think considering these things tells us something about ourselves if we don't want them to die out, if there are people who diligently stick to these traditions so that way they still exist and they want to pass them down and they want others to know about them. What does that say about us? And what can we learn from that? What do we take away from that? So anyway, I thought that was very interesting. Again, it was 10 essays. All of them I thought were fascinating. And I would recommend this if you are someone who wants to get into nonfiction, but you're not sure where to start, or you think it's going to be dry or boring. This book was not dry, it was not boring, and it was a lot of fun, and it was very interesting. I definitely recommend this. That's all for this week, folks. I know that in the past I've had 4 books, but the unpacking really got to my energy this week, and so this is where we're at. But it was a really good reading week, and I'm excited for the week coming up because I've already started a Steinbeck piece that I haven't read before, which is really lovely and exciting. I love Steinbeck. He's my favorite classic author, and so I'll take any chance to read or reread something by him. And then I've got some other books that, I mean, obviously I have other books, and it's exciting to have so many options. And there's some books that I have been waiting to get into, and now I'm like, I don't know which one to start with since they're all here again. So who knows what else we'll have this coming week, but I just know it's bound to be good. And I hope that you also have a week full of good literature, good stories. And until then, happy reading.